tomorrow to be precise. So as we've it's been the case, only the advisory group, working group members and other SANDAG staff are able to speak. But if there is some time left at the end, we of course welcome comments and questions from the audience and from whoever have to present. And we also will have a guest speaker for our event today, Francisco Carvajal, will be talking about some of his recent initiatives and projects. Sorry, going back. So please, for those of you who are panelists and attendees, if you would like to speak, we'll ask you to please raise your hand. And just in case you want to agree with another member's opinion, just we ask you to use the icons on the Zoom platform to do so. Because we have limited time, that we welcome your opinion and input, but sometimes to keep the agenda on time, we will be moving along with the conversations as scheduled to make sure that all the topics planned for this meeting are covered. And on that note, these are the topics for the agenda today. We're going to do a brief discussion of the latest advisory group working group of efforts. SANDAG staff will present an overview of the service provider survey results, and for the first time, we'll present some of our findings on the best practices review. Finally, we would like to have the advisory group input on community forums scheduled for January. And as I mentioned, we'll have Francisco Carvajal from the Juvenile Justice Commission presenting for 10 to 15 minutes at the end of this presentation. And then later on, we have scheduled 25 minutes for open sharing by the advisory group members and for any questions or comments for the public if we have the time. So moving forward with the agenda, first is just discussing some of the working advisory group and working group efforts. I'm just being told that there's a presenter view on the screen. I apologize for that. It's not intended to be like that. Let me see if does that work? Do you see it? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So some of the latest group efforts during the last advisory group meeting, we had the opportunity to have a joint meeting with the ATI advisory group and working group together, where we discussed many important items, and when we for the first time accomplished to put together both groups and to favor discussion among them, and just to understand a little more of their role and the work the different groups are doing for this ATI report. Also, as we move forward and as we get closer to the final to producing the final version of the ATI report, advisory group has been working hard to develop or to generate an addenda to the report. Will be published along with, will be included with our report while they present their some of their input and some of the things that suggestions for further research and for other initiatives and alternatives that they have been discussing during their discussions. This would be a good opportunity for the advisory group members to just let us know the status of the document and some of the major highlights that you would like to share in this meeting. And finally, this meeting today will be a good opportunity to discuss the future for the subgroup discussions. As you know, we have been working separately with smaller groups of the advisory group, the advisory group, to kind of develop and discuss some items and some topics in further detail. And this has been a major factor for producing the addenda. But as advisory group moves forward to generate this document, I think this would be a good opportunity to discuss whether we believe there is more need to coordinate those smaller subgroup sessions for the advisory group. So moving forward with the next item, we will now talk about and present some of the results from the service provider survey that SANDAG conducted over the last months. And for that, I'm gonna let Dr. Cindy Burke to share with us some of the overview of this results.
Hi, everybody. You can go to the next slide, Octavio. So this was not part of our original scope of work, but when we were meeting with Darwin and Bill, we were talking about how to supplement our analysis that we're going to be doing related to needs, services, and gaps. And on our community survey, we had asked individuals who were currently or formerly incarcerated if they had needs, if those needs had been met, and barriers. And so we did a 4-question survey and we got around 60 responses. It was a quick window, but we really wanted to get a different point of view of what service providers thought. You can go back. Thanks. And as you can see here, one of the 4 questions was, what needs do you think individuals who are adults, not juveniles, since that's the focus of this project, have? And so what we want to do, and we'll be presenting this in our report that's going to be coming out in December, but we wanted to share it with this advisory group to see if you had thoughts or feedback. So just to highlight some of the differences, when Sydney, who's on our call, analyzed the data, I was curious to say, well, how different are the perceptions from the service providers we talked to from the community members? So you can see the data here. The highlighted are the top 5 needs, and that was rated as a significant need. The column on the left is the community survey we did. The column on the right are service providers that we talked to. And the first thing I'd like to highlight is that service providers generally were more likely than the communities to say that they perceive something being a significant need. So you can see those percentages are higher. The community individuals said that we're most likely to say employment assistance at 58%, but 87% was the percentage for housing. So you can see that the percentages overall were higher. In terms of similarity of needs, there were some interesting differences. Employment assistance and housing, they were top rated by both groups, but service providers were more likely to say substance abuse treatment and mental health care are significant needs. And then the community was more likely to say basic necessities and transportation assistance were top needs, but those were not top needs for the service providers. So I think this is interesting context, and I'd love to have anybody's input after I get through the next couple of slides. I know meeting Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can't go on to higher needs until you have those basic needs met. The fact that the community were less likely to say they had substance use needs or mental health, that could reflect that they didn't perceive it. They had not been assessed for that. So a lot of different reasons for this data. And we will be putting it together to tell the entire story when we have the data, but thought that was interesting. And we will be putting this PowerPoint online and sharing it with you all in case you have thoughts after the meeting. Next slide, please. The second question we asked on the community survey, it was an open-ended question: are there barriers to getting services? And we coded those open-ended responses into categories. And you can see for the community, the most common ones were that a service was not easy to get to, it was too hard to find out about, the waiting list was too long, and then other common reasons, but less, not as often stated, was eligibility restrictions, too hard to enroll. Oh, go back, please. That's okay. Timing did not work or didn't feel like it was a fit. Service providers, we actually, since we had these codes, could put this on the survey. So they had the option just to check. And you can see that their number one barrier they thought was waiting lists were too long, 2/3. 59%, the same percentage, said the issue about not being easy to get to, which goes again to that need of transportation assistance. And then 60%, I thought that was an interesting difference, thought the timing did not work for participants, compared to 27% of the community members that we surveyed. So you can see those are some of the differences there. Next slide, please.
Cindy, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, Betsy.
I'm sorry. Is it community refers to the community or the population of people who are in prison now, in jail now?
That was from our community survey. So there was over 300 people who did our community survey who were currently or formerly incarcerated. So that was their perception of their own personal needs.
I see. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And so this was a brand new question, which again, thank you to Bill and Darwin for stimulating us to ask this. We were talking, and it was also coming from our discussion with you all, that service providers have barriers. It's not just clients. So thank you for those who gave input as we put this questionnaire together. You can see that the options that we gave people of what could be a barrier to service providers, and we asked them, was it a significant barrier, somewhat of a barrier, or not a barrier? And you can see the most common ones relate to staffing and funding. Retaining staff. There was the mention, I believe, in one of our meetings that sometimes service provider staff could go to another agency that's paying more money. Finding qualified staff and hiring them, obtaining reliable funding, restrictions on funding use, contract requirements for funding, and then also long wait lists, reporting requirements for funders, and ability to do warm handoffs, which is also a best practice that Sarah may be talking to you about next. Unrealistic funding outcome measures and adequate information for referrals, retaining clients, receiving client referrals, inability to access client data, engaging clients, and workload management. So again, we want to weave this in as we're looking comprehensively at all the data we'll be collecting to see where are the common themes again. We really want to make it clear that it's not just having a service in the community. We want to know it's implemented with fidelity, but also that that every barrier to getting that service is removed. So this information was really helpful to have, I think, and added a good context. So again, would love your thoughts. And I think there's one more slide. And then we also threw in at the last minute, because we've had a lot of conversations about when a treatment isn't mandated and someone may have so many years of substance use or trauma that they're not able to maybe actively engage and see what might be in one's best interest. We just said, what are some of the best ways that you think are to engage clients? And so this was open-ended, and just to highlight some of the themes we heard from the people who returned surveys: motivational interviewing, the meeting clients where they are, building a relationship, the importance of ongoing follow-up, making sure their basic needs are met, making sure that they don't feel like the service they're receiving is a punishment, make them part of the process, ensure they're heard, make receiving the service and enrolling as easy as possible, engaging and support those around the client, such as family, making sure that everybody remembers that one size does not fit all, and then utilize credible messengers and peer support. So that's the data for the that part of the extra survey that we did. We'll be writing this up for the next report, but if anybody, I'd love to turn it over for Octavio to facilitate any questions or comments from anybody that might have thoughts on this. If it surprises you, it's what you see from your experience, because I know we have a number of service providers on our advisory group. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And now it seems that the technology is beating me. So I'm going to try to have the presentation again in presenter mode, but in full screen. So bear with me. Okay. So it doesn't seem to be working. So we'll continue. We'll continue with any questions from the advisory group members. Just let us know, raise your hand in case you want to ask something. Otherwise, we will continue to the next item on the agenda, which is an overview of Sandag's best practices review by Sarah Egan. Sarah, I think you can go.
All right. Thank you, Octavio. And hi to everyone. Thanks for being here. So in our review of best practices, and you can go to the next slide, Octavio, if you're able to. Thank you. So in looking at best practices, we are looking at general approaches and types of programs that are, oh, whoops. There we go. Can everybody see? All right. Sorry about that. What's a meeting without some technology issues? So in looking at best practices, what we've been looking at in this research is different types of interventions and program types that has the aim of reducing justice system involvement, whether through diversion at the point of first contact or before law enforcement contact, so people that are at risk of becoming system involved, or all the way through to the end at reentry, so preventing recidivism and facilitating successful reentry into the community, and preventing further unnecessary justice system contact. And so that's kind of what we define as a best practice. We're looking at practices that primarily apply to low-level offenders, so people with low-level drug offenses, petty theft, nonviolent, although a lot of these best practices also apply to higher level offenders with more severe crimes. And that's why they're best practices. So the practices that we're looking at, and just as a quick disclaimer, this is still in progress, and what has been reviewed may not include everything that is available everywhere. It's as comprehensive as possible, and we're including evidence that's available at the time of writing, with the recognition that more evidence may come out in the future that could show that there are more effective practices. But this is an overview of what is considered to be best practice now and the types of programs that fall under those practices. And another characteristic of best practices as we're researching them is that they address unmet criminogenic needs, which is just a fancy word for the types of things that lead people to engage in criminal behavior. Things like antisocial attitudes and behaviors, substance use issues, barriers to successful employment. Practices and programs that address those things that lead people to system contact in the first place are practices and programs that we're especially interested in. And you can go to the next slide, please. So in conducting this research, obviously there are a lot of different approaches out there, a lot of practices that have been evaluated and programs that have been evaluated. So in looking at what all is out there, we look at a review of types of evidence, so peer-reviewed academic journals, criminal justice and public health research, and also policy evaluations from major think tanks that evaluate criminal justice reform, and programs like the Vera Institute for Justice, Urban Labs, University of Chicago, RAND. So there's a lot of research out there that we're try to synthesize their findings and look at the types of things that have the most evidence behind them as being effective in reducing recidivism and in also diverting people from unnecessary incarceration and contact with law enforcement. And so what we're using to kind of organize this review is the sequential intercept model, which I believe we've discussed in previous meetings, which is basically just an organizing framework to show at what points along the continuum of potential contact with the justice system people that these practices might best apply. So this includes, again, people at risk prior to their first arrest, leading all the way through incarceration and reentry. And so we also recognize that certain best practices kind of transcend the sequential intercept model, or they might apply to multiple different intercept groupings. But this is just kind of an organizing framework, and we can discuss if anybody has questions or concerns about that. And then we're basically highlighting best practices that exist anywhere, with the aim of looking at the types of things that are working elsewhere that we might implement here in San Diego County, or if we are already implementing certain types of best practices in San Diego County, how we might best expand those. And I believe we have a question from Andrea.
Oh, yes. Hi. Hello,
Hi.
everyone. Hi, thank you, Sarah, for giving this overview. And I have a couple of questions. The first question is, and I don't know how far you guys are into the review of the existing literature, but the last time I looked into this, I found that most of the research was qualitative rather than quantitative, and I was wondering if that has changed or if you now find that there are more substantial, larger scale quantitative studies that examine the effectiveness of specific interventions that are not in custody based, because there's a lot of research on that, but rather, that are focused on the community intervention level. The other question I have is, are you considering at all to which extent, or maybe, I don't know if this is part of your literature review, but excuse me, are you looking into whether there is research that examines to which extent criminal justice procedures lead to increased recidivism rates? I know that sounds a bit odd, but we have certain procedures and practices in place that might not intentionally, but unintentionally contribute to, for example, eroding people's social economic basis, for example, which in turn might make obtaining and maintaining employment more important, which in turn might increase their risk for offense or recidivism, or whatever you want to call it. So those are the two questions I have. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you for those questions, Andrea. Both very good questions. So to answer your second one first, we're looking primarily at, so we are taking into consideration the negative effects that incarceration can have on further system involvement. And so that's something that we've seen in some of the reviews of looking at the types of practices that kind of try to reverse some of the negative consequences of incarceration. But our focus is on programs and approaches that kind of address criminogenic needs and these types of things that lead to criminal justice system contact in the first instance. But that is something that we've seen in our research, looking at certain practices that are, if not trying to reverse or mitigate the consequences of incarceration, then to at least kind of address root causes. And to answer your first question, it was previously more qualitative, but there are some more quantitative studies that have come out recently using some like causal inference methods. And so there have been some, and a lot of really good work has been coming out of University of Chicago and Urban Labs that kind of leverages existing data. So one example that we came across was City of Denver has a really good data infrastructure that allows for kind of looking at criminal records and police contacts across time. And so one study was looking at the effect of mobile crisis response teams in Denver. Their program is called STAR, and we'll talk about that later. But that's one example of some more quantitative kind of causal inference types of studies that we're looking at. But again, a lot of the older stuff, as you mentioned, is more qualitative, but it does seem like some of it is going in a more quantitative direction.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. And then Octavio, you can go to the next slide, please. Thanks.
Is this the one?
So just to highlight a couple of the types of things that we're looking at, this is by no means an exhaustive accounting of the programs and practices we're evaluating or that we're looking at, or including in the best practices review. These are just some examples. So some examples of practices along intercept 0 and 1. So again, these are approaches to preventing people either in the first instance from coming into contact with law enforcement. So people in crisis, having mental health crises, substance use struggles, things like that, who may otherwise come into contact with law enforcement, looking at ways to respond to them and divert them away from system contact and towards care and services that they need to address their issues. And so one of the programs that we've looked at that has a lot of quantitative support for being effective is the Support Team Assisted Response program in the city of Denver. And that's similar to the mobile crisis response teams that we already have here in San Diego County, although the STAR team has been more fully integrated with 911 dispatch in Denver. But this is a program where they target specific low-level offenses and train 911 dispatchers to respond to calls in a way where they send STAR teams, so behavioral health clinicians, to the scene rather than sending law enforcement, and they can then connect those people with needed services and keep them from going to jail in the first place. And so we're kind of looking at this as a model for maybe expanding MCRTs or because MCRTs right now are not fully integrated with 911 dispatch in the city of San Diego. But that's one example of the types of practices and programs we're looking at along this intercept. We're also looking at law enforcement assisted diversion programs. So programs where people do come into contact with law enforcement, but where they can still be diverted. And this is more at the discretion of law enforcement. But some programs that we've seen or that the working group and some have expressed interest in, there's one called the Pinellas Safe Harbor Program in Florida, which is essentially an opportunity for law enforcement to divert primarily homeless individuals, but people who have a lot of mental health or substance use issues away from incarceration and towards needed services. So it's essentially a secure shelter, but also provides connection to services, transportation to medical appointments, job interviews, things like that. And so that's something that there's been some interest in as well. Next slide, thanks. And Intercept 2.3, certain things to kind of reduce the need for people to be arrested in the first place. So reducing failure to appear. This is a relatively simple practice in theory. They're mostly behavioral interventions to kind of prevent people from being arrested for failing to appear in court due to a warrant. So there was a study in North Carolina, for example, that looked at the high incidence of failure to appear arrests and ways to reduce them. And then also looking at types of programming within prisons and jails that might kind of get to your question, Andrea, about mitigating some of the harmful effects of incarceration. So things like jail or prison-based educational programming. So there's the Inside Out Prison Exchange program that brings college students and professors inside prisons to kind of facilitate education gain and connection with employment. Next slide, please. And then some other practices that we found some evidence as being effective and that there's interest in the working group as well are expanding wraparound reentry services and conducting jail in-reach for people before reentry to connect them with the services that they need and to facilitate a successful reentry. So an example is the Anti-Recidivism Coalition that works with state prisons in California. And also warm handoffs for post-release care and services in recognition of the high barriers to healthcare that the incarcerated population faces and the role that this may play in contributing to unnecessary system contact. So transitions clinics kind of provide community health workers going into jails and prisons and warm handoffs for people as they reenter the community to connect them with a level of continuity of care that facilitates successful reentry. Next slide. So as I said, not a full accounting of the research that we've done so far. We're still conducting research, and some members of the advisory group have noted some types of programs and services that we should look into. Recommendations are always welcome. Please send me an email at the email on the screen if there's anything that you would like us to look at or discuss. The next steps for this are incorporating this research into the December draft comprehensive report with an eye towards kind of being able to draft evidence-based recommendations of types of practices and programs to implement here in San Diego County.
Thank you very much, Sarah. This is wonderful. This is the first time that we share publicly some of these findings, and they're very interesting, and we're looking forward to include them in the next interim report, and of course in the final report. So the next agenda item is discussing about January community forums. As you know, as part of this of the ATI program, we had a series of community forums held during the summer. And finally, we will have 2 more community forums scheduled by the end of the program, right before submitting the final draft of the report. So the goal for this community forums is to receive any feedback that we can include in the final report. But the reason why it's important for us to bring this item here is because as in the previous community forums, you were of tremendous help to help us spread the word about these forums, and of course to increase participation. So once again, we ask your help to figure out how are we going to make it to have more participation in this community forums. We've collected a lot of very, very interesting information, in fact, some of the results from the advisory from the community forums, or some of the most important topics in the community forums, led us to create or to identify the main themes for our subgroup discussions. So again, this was extremely helpful for us, and I assume for you too, to have some of these participations. So I guess this is a question for you. Are there any suggestions, any comments on how we can promote participation on the January community forums? We don't have a date yet. We're looking into that, but as we prepare to launch those 2 last community forums, we wanted to just ask the advisory group if you would have any suggestion or any comments on how we can incentivize members of the community to participate. Watana, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, yes. So just a question about meeting in person. Is that on the table as an option, or at least a hybrid option?
Thank you, Watana. That would be a possibility that we would have to look. We don't have a lot of funding for the community forums, but certainly there's something that we can look into. Especially if we can come up with some sort of hybrid model. Do you think that would incentivize more participation?
I think it would, but I think that people there's quite a bit of fatigue around the screen, and maybe just having that option. Also, I think the people who are going to come and participate, or who would be online and participate, those people are extremely motivated anyways, so they're going to do it either way. I think that just meeting in person sometimes gives those people who are extremely fatigued online and are not also not just, they don't participate fully when online, but do so in person, to give them an option. Thinking about who we want to participate, it may not be people we don't want, having technology to be a barrier for people to participate. I guess you could say the same about transportation, but those are just my thoughts around it.
Thank you very much, Watana, and of course we appreciate the feedback. Certainly, that's something that we can look into. I recognize what you say about possible barriers and the screen fatigue. So, this can certainly be an option for us to discuss. And if you all have any suggestions, you can always send us an email, or during the open sharing portion of this presentation at the end, we can discuss more about it, but yeah, we welcome very much your suggestions as we move forward with the organization of this two last community forums in January. So we are a little ahead of time. We have, as I mentioned, a guest speaker today, Francisco Carvajal from the Juvenile Justice Commission. So why don't we jump ahead, Francisco, and we can probably leave the 10 minutes that we gain at the end for public comments and questions. So
yeah,
Francisco,
sure.
I don't know if you are able to share your screen.
It looks like I am.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, you cannot start screen share. Well,
okay, I have your presentation here. Why
I
don't
think
I?
it's only because you're sharing. As soon as you stop sharing, then I'll be able to share, it looks like.
Okay, let me stop sharing and let me know. Otherwise, I have the presentation ready here.
Yep, there we go.
Perfect.
All right, cool. So you're able to see that, right?
Yes.
All right, team. Well, thanks, Octavio, for inviting me, and Darwin for making this happen. I know Darwin's been asking me to kind of come in because we share a lot of the same common goals, a little bit of what the ATI group is doing and what new the Juvenile Justice Commission is doing. So my name is Francisco. Please call me Paco, Paco Taco, whatever you'd like. I'm born and raised here on Kumeyaay land in San Diego, also known as San Diego, and also known as Tijuana, Mexico. Throughout my years, I've been doing a lot of restorative justice diversion programming, which I hope, Sarah, you're able to include some of that into your research for diversion programs when it comes to recidivism also, and hopefully looking into new and innovative programs, not just evidence-based programs, because we know some of the programming out there doesn't have the ability to gather all that research and evaluation to make it evidence-based. But that would be great. And happy International Restorative Justice Week also. Today we were invited to speak with the U.S. Department of Justice because they want to know more about how restorative justice is working with the criminal justice system and eventually transitioning into something more that's more care first model, similar to what LA is doing in changing their whole vision from probation to something that's a little bit more youth development. But I've been with the commission for about 2 years. And then after, getting my feet wet with the commission, I decided that it was time to create also the juvenile diversion subcommittee within the commission. But just a little bit on the commission itself, these are our missions and goals. This I might be preaching to the choir with some of you that are familiar or maybe have been in the commission in prior years. But the purpose of the commission is to act as public conscience for those who provide services to children, youth, families, and the juvenile justice and dependency systems, and when deemed necessary, to make recommendations for improving that delivery of services. And our legal authorization is right there set forth by the California Welfare Institute Code, section 225 through 231. So if the commission is new to some of you, we are community members, we're community volunteers. So we're doing this on our own time outside of our normal full-time jobs. So there's always openings, so feel free to always look into that because we're always looking for more commissioners. Just a little bit on the juvenile diversion subcommittee that we recently created. We really wanted to identify all responsible youth juvenile diversion programs in order to really evaluate the policies, practices, and protocols. This may include pre-arrest, post-arrest, or post-filing diversion of prosecution. And I just want to say that Darwin's a part of that group as well, in helping us out. So this is what we've been discovering pretty much, at least with my time with the commission. There's gaps in diversion programs during our yearly inspections of jails, of all the jails in the county, just recently completing the El Cajon one and only having one diversion program rather than multiple diversion programs for the diverse population of youth and young adults that are out there. The net whining effect that's happening in San Diego, it's a little troubling that what we're starting to see as more community involvement and more efforts are being put for youth to exit the system at earlier exit points. And I'll talk about that a little bit here. New data that's being captured through the Juvenile Diversion Initiative, as some of you are very familiar with now, This data has never been captured ever before. So it's really exciting to study and research it and just dissect it as much as we can, so we can see how we can help out in diverting a lot more youth to earlier exit points. There's a lot of outdated policies and procedures too. So we've noticed that there's a lot of policies and procedures that are 2015, sometimes even older. So we want to make sure that those are being adjusted as youth needs increase or just expand. Law enforcement requests, we're getting this so much, even post COVID. They just want more diversion options. They want those diversion options to hold youth accountable, and then themselves are asking for more training that they can take to be able to know when to divert youth to which programs, as long as law, of course, allows it. And of course, you know that the juvenile diversion initiative is in place for those cases that need to go to the district attorney's office. And as more funds are going to community programs, pre-charge diversion programs before they actually are charged with wrongdoing, we need to continue remembering about the people harmed and the victims of those incidents too. So we need to make sure that these diversion programs are adjusting their processes and procedures to allow services to be given to the person harmed too, not just restitution, but actually putting them together in the same room, as long as it's a safe space, with the youth responsible, or young adults that's responsible. And a lot of laws have changed recently, which is exciting, and that's the sealing and non-disclosure processes that need to be in place with law enforcement to ensure that a youth can actually answer no to job applications when they're asked if they've ever been arrested before. I know I got asked that question. I'm pretty sure it's still out there, but for me, it's to answer yes or no, even though I took part of some of the worst the community had to offer. But this time is the importance of sealing the record is so they can honestly say no if they're successful through diversion. So some of the law enforcement are still not, they don't have those procedures in place. So what we're doing is we're just learning from justice partners and stakeholders first. We're listening to community members, youth, parents, school professionals, and then eventually we're going to make our own recommendations to the county and to the state. This is more probably at a smaller scale than also what ATI has going on in a bigger spectrum. But we also want to make sure that the people that are on the field, whether it's community advocates, youth, law enforcement, are also providing their input rather than just the higher ups too. So that's really good. And we're hoping to, make these kind of recommendations probably in the next couple of months too, maybe around the same time as ATI. So hopefully we're able to work together. So it just makes more sense. Here's a little bit of a mess of what we have going on and this is, again, you've probably seen this in different ways, but this is our current juvenile justice system, at least from what we're seeing. The great part about this right there is number 5, right? So number 5 is brand new, that the DA now has their own juvenile diversion program. So this is new here in San Diego. So that's great that there's number 5 still at the pre-charge level. But what we're trying to concentrate on is number 3, law enforcement diversion, before even they get an opportunity to be diverted at the DA's office. So we want to make sure that law enforcement, every single law enforcement around here, has multiple diversion contracts, multiple memorandums of understanding with different organizations providing youth services. For example, the LGBT Center, they offer certain specific programming and services that address the specific needs of our LGBTQ youth. And of course, we want to make sure schools have their programs in place before law enforcement contact. So that would be at the 1 and 2 level right here at the exit point. So that way law enforcement is never involved. But if they are involved, it's making sure that our youth are able to successfully complete the programs, receive the services they need, able to continue the services post, graduation of those diversion programs, and making sure you see at the bottom there's a couple welfare institution codes that law enforcement has to follow in order to seal those records, or at least have some protocols for the non-disclosure. And there's a lot of work that the Juvenile Justice Commission has been doing later on, maybe exit point 6, 7, 8, and 9. But, ever since I came in with my work with diversion, and a lot of the commissioners there have done their work with diversion, we now want to concentrate also on 1 through 6 and 1 through 5. So that's what we're doing, and that's why we started the committee. This is a lot, I believe. Octavia is going to share this with everybody. But again, you know, there's different options that can be given along the exit points. At the earlier point, of course, like I mentioned, at school or community organizations that can provide some sort of mediation services, victim offender dialogue before involving law enforcement. Same thing with number 2. It's just law enforcement might have been involved, but they're just given a warning. Number 3, this is where, again, you know, we want to concentrate on and making sure there's a lot of diversion opportunities to offer or available to officers, juvenile detectives. So that way, if a youth unfortunately comes in a second time, you know, it's not, you know, now you're going to the DA's office or to probation. No, it's actually, we have this other diversion program that will concentrate more on so-and-so the needs that are needed. For example, you know, the District Attorney's Juvenile Diversion Initiative works a lot with the San Diego Risk and Resiliency checkup tool that probation uses. I heard criminogenic needs earlier, so that can also be supportive in implementing maybe some sort of assessments that are a little bit more maybe mental health focused also at the law enforcement level. So that would be great. Yeah, so we've been studying a little bit of what's been coming out. We're not researchers, we're not evaluators, we're just people that kind of common sense makes us look at, you know, we look at numbers and we look at pie charts and we look at the larger slices, right? So as you know, the district attorney started their diversion program last year, and then statistics are starting to come out. So as you can see, the youth that are being from the neighborhoods that are being sent to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution or diversion at their end are majority Escondido, San Marcos, Vista, you see Chula Vista, El Cajon, Mid-City still in there, Spring Valley, and then which other ones? I say Oceanside. So we want to, because there's so many law enforcement agencies out there and substations, the commission can't really do a full-on, you know, project to discover why. But so what we're doing is just concentrating on the bigger slices right there. And again, something that we're discovering from the district attorney's office is that 69%, if you notice down here, if you can see my cursor, 69% of youth in the Juvenile Diversion Initiative program are low level to recidivate. Now, of course, some of those are felonies that, you know, by law, it needs to go to the DA, but they can divert it. But that is telling us something, right? That our youth have the opportunity to change and learn from their mistakes because they're going to receive a low level dosage from at the DA level. So if we're able to offer as much as we can at the law enforcement A level, that'll be amazing. That'll be amazing. Multiple diversion programs, contracts, and MOUs. And then net winding, of course. So net winding is the social control of our individuals when addressing a harm. And this is a little bit of what we're noticing as more funds, more support, more community engagement is being given to exit points 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We want to make sure that community continues to be supported and expands and more funds come in at that level too. Not just community at 7, 8, and 9, which is still incredibly important. That's when our criminal justice system has a little bit more control over young people. So what we want to see right now, what we're starting to notice is actually the criminal justice system is inching a little bit into the pre-charge level when it should really stay more towards the post-charge level and increase and the community side should be increasing more of their services, right? So that way there's trust, there's buy-in and all of that. Something also that we started just gathering are just some quick solutions to the net winding that's happening in San Diego. Again, more diversions. I sound like a broken record, but more diversion contracts with multiple community organizations at the earlier exit points to provide law enforcement with more options to divert youth with multiple needs and higher risk to recidivate. Policies and procedures for law enforcement and organizations for the sealing and non-disclosure of records. That includes the arrest record, the juvenile contact form, when a youth successfully completes the program. Policies and procedures for screening eligibility. So this helps avoid sending youth to unnecessary intervention and cherry picking and our biases, because we all have biases, right? So that can lead to the misuse of taxpayer money. Policies and procedures for newly learned youth information by diversion service providers. This helps avoid making community organizations investigative bodies to the justice system that can once again lead to the misuse of taxpayer money. So eventually, if a lot of those items are in place, our hope at the bottom right here is that once again, the criminal justice partners are a little bit more still concentrated in the post-charge for youth and young adults that unfortunately, need that controlled environment at the beginning. But then we're also seeing a lot more control of the community at the earlier exit points, right? But it's going to take buy-in, of course, for both parties, everybody, to understand that, yeah, you send folks more down on exit point number 3, they're going to be taken care of because community organizations, services are plentiful. All right, and these are just ideas so far that we have to provide recommendations to the county, to current diversion program administrators, and then some law enforcement. There's a lot more. These are just a couple that I just threw in here to kind of get an idea of what's going to happen in the next couple of months. I'm hopeful. We're hopeful that a spending package is put forth by the county for community investments to address the impact of punitive systems on young people. And I forgot to put people there, so as you can see, it's just draft. And potential transition to a more restorative framework using phased approaches along the way. Of course, there's a lot to that. Establish an entity to assist schools and law enforcement to locate new diversion programs. There's a lot of organizations out there that just with a little bit of guidance and navigation, they're able to provide or make a diversion program on themselves with their specific services. Establish a phased approach to redesigning the policies and procedures of the office contracts and purchasing department for the county as well to allow more innovative and restorative processes to take place. Restorative justice is a way of life. It's a lifelong process. And I've been a huge advocate of that. And it starts with as soon as the pen gets on the paper, and that includes other departments as well, even the audit and advisory department. Diversion program administrators establish youth-ran advisory councils to help, redesign and strengthen some of their practices. And maybe there's hope that their programs can also provide services for the person harmed. Establish a form of communication with each referral partner to address positive and negative outcomes of the programming. This was kind of something surprising to me when we're doing the inspections of all the jails, and that law enforcement will get some feedback from the services through other entities rather than directly from the program managers at that community organization. So it's always good for the people that are on the field to talk to one another, right? So that's always good. So some kind of communication. Establish a phased approach to redesign policies and procedures from outdated case management processes to a more restorative model of managing cases. And lastly, law enforcement create new partnerships and community organizations through MOUs. Again, sounding like a broken record, but I think that's just important because our diverse youth population. So again, thank you for inviting me. Thanks, Darwin and Octavio. That's our email right there. You can reach out to us. And we have our quarterly public meetings that happen too. On our website, you can go on to look for those dates too. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Paco. Yeah, and as you mentioned, this the presentation is going to be uploaded to the ATI website, and it's going to be available to the public tomorrow. But yeah, we have a few minutes for questions for Paco. Are there any members of the advisory group that want to ask a question? Okay. Well, let us know, because we're now entering into the last segment of our meeting, and this is open sharing by advisory group members. So, I mean, you can, of course, share thoughts and comments, but also this would be an opportunity for any questions for Paco and the work he's doing on diversion initiatives for juveniles. And if you prefer, there are a couple of questions or a couple of topics that we wanted to discuss with the advisory group. And one of these is if you are able to share some of the progress and updates on the addendum that the advisory group is working on. So if you'll be willing to share or just at least provide some update on where it's at this point. I'm not sure if I know that Bill was very active in promoting the work. I don't know if Bill or Watana or Andrea have any updates for us on the work that the advisory group is doing. Okay. So, so I know Bill cannot talk right now. So, but thanks for letting us know, Bill. And I want to invite if there are any members of the public who has questions. We have time, and we certainly welcome your opinions and comments. So feel free to raise your hand, and we will give you an opportunity to talk or to ask questions. And I see Andrea. Andrea, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Octavio. So as far as the addendum is concerned, I believe I've maybe missed one subgroup meeting. I believe I've been to all the other meetings, and to my knowledge, there is not currently a joint effort between different advisory group members to actually work on a document. I'm more than happy to take the lead on that if people feel that that might be helpful. I'm just sharing about my, maybe I have a lack of knowledge about what's being done, I'm not sure, but I don't believe that there have been collaborative efforts to start drafting a document.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea, and yeah, I mean, thank you for volunteering for this. We will certainly be open for if you would like to meet once more on the subgroups, but I think this is a good moment for the advisory group to focus on developing this collaborative piece. And of course, we will certainly be happy to coordinate or help you coordinate this effort. But this is an effort that was suggested and promoted by the advisory group members, and so we want to be an advisory group collaborative initiative. So thank you very much, Andrea, and we will follow up with the different members to see if there's any interest in participating in this collaborative effort in the next coming months. And let us know if anyone from the attendees or the advisory group members have any other comments or questions. We still have about 25 minutes scheduled, so please let us know if you want to participate. So I am not seeing any hands. I'm not seeing members of the public having questions or wanting to participate. Again, we want to take advantage of this opportunity, but it will be important to, for example, to ask if the advisory groups, as Andrea is asking, are you have any particular program in mind that you're looking at that should be that we should be looking at in the best practices, or any other suggestions that you might have for now? Please please let us know. And again, we have about 25 more minutes scheduled, but of course we don't want to take advantage of your time. This has been a very productive meeting. We have been able to present a lot of updates on the research, and we had the opportunity to hear Paco and what the council is doing. So I have Watana wants to participate. Watana, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Yes, like Bill, I am in transit, but can now talk. Apologies. One of the things that I have done, I've reached out to a couple of contacts that I have at Vera, and one in particular who assisted and continues to assist LA County, and what Paco referred to, as really a redo of their approach to first justice contacts and diversion. And so I'd like to have a little more time to suss that out and have another, again, I'm volunteering, they're volunteering their time with me, which I appreciate. So I would like a little more time to get some additional information from them. But I think that, and I can touch base with Sarah on this as well, so that there's no duplication of efforts, but that we're able to get some good data, and also just some additional, something for the addendum that makes sense past what SANDAG is going to present to the supervisors. And again, I know I've volunteered to help write Andrea, and have not responded to your email about your time restrictions. But I do appreciate so much the work that you're doing. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Watana. Andrea.
So funny. So it's not funny, but Watana and I have been trying for at least 3 months or so to do collaborative research into ATI in other counties and states. And because we're both very active, I suppose it's not coming together. But I actually just recently, I believe it was last week, sent her an email and I said, Watana, my work is getting even more busy. I don't think I can meet and talk this over. But of course, I want this work to be successful. I want the efforts of this advisory group to be successful. And it's a group effort. And, one person should not have to shoulder this. If advisory group members initially agreed that it would be a good idea to add additional information into an addendum, to add it to the SANDAG report, then I would like to see that actually happening. Personally, I'm in support of that. But I also can't do it on my own. I know that if I reach out to Bill, he will most certainly be welcoming me with open arms, and we will get it done together. But I truly invite everybody on this advisory board to reach out, to start communicating, and see how we can best collaborate to enhance. And this is how I really look at the work of this advisory group. How can we best enhance the information that SANDAG will be providing in their final report to the Board of Supervisors?
Thank you, Andrea. And yes, I think now that we have more findings on different aspects of the project, that that we've been making a lot of progress, and now we have a better understanding or a better idea of what the best practices portion is going to be. I think this would be a good opportunity for the advisory group members to see what else is there to add to provide a lot more context and a lot more expertise from the field on what we are presenting, on the data we're presenting. So yeah, I thank you very much. We will follow up with an email to the different members to just to promote this effort. Again, this is something we want us to be fully advisory group effort, but we will be happy to get the ball rolling if you want to, and then once you can come up with a plan, you can start generating the report. Batana.
I think it's worth mentioning that if there are advisory members on this call in this meeting who would like to participate but aren't exactly sure, you know, in this addendum and in this final product, but aren't really quite sure where they fit in or how they could do that, we can figure out how they can. You know, so if you don't have the answer right this minute on sort of what your position in this is or where you fit in, I don't think you need to, but having conversations and some more conversations about it would most probably be helpful, I think, to some members who aren't already, you know, clear on what they want to do towards this effort.
Yeah, thank you, Watan, and I think that's a great idea. I think if there are members of the advisory group that, you know, want to collaborate or participate in a way, but they're not sure on how, we can certainly start, you know, trying to you know, conducting the efforts towards an organized, you know, starting the work for a more organized collaborative effort. So if you feel like you want to contribute, just not sure how, please let us know. Send us an email, or, you know, the floor is open now if you want to share. But otherwise, we don't want to, you know, waste a lot of time if there are no further comments or questions. So I don't see any more hands, any more interest in participation. So I guess we can finish this meeting a little earlier. I want to thank you all who were able to come to this meeting, and all of you have been coming to all the meetings, not only the advisory group, but also the subgroups. We really thank you. We really value your efforts, and we're very happy that we're doing this together, and, you know, somehow that there's going to be a voice for the advisory group in this final report by Sandag. Also, I want to thank the members of the public who attended today. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments. You can go to the ATI page on our website, and all the comments there, we read them and we answer them when they need to be answered. And also, I want to thank Paco for his presentation. And thank you very much for all the work you're doing and for sharing this. And hopefully we can somehow, as you mentioned, you know, bring these efforts together in the future. So if there are no further questions, I think we can bring this meeting to an end. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Thank you to Sandag staff, Sarah, Sydney, Cesar, and thank you, Dr. Berg, for your leadership. And thank you all for coming today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.